Now, this debate over mandatory coronavirus vaccinations, especially in the workplace, is going to go on for quite a while. Only staff in aged care are at the moment required to get the jab, and other companies are free to introduce their own policies, but they're going to be left to sort of deal with legal consequences themselves. We've heard previously about SPC, the cannery in Victoria, and yesterday I mentioned the Flying Kangaroo unveiled their own policy, becoming the biggest company to bring in mandatory vaccination for their workers.
All frontline staff, cabin crew, pilots and aviation workers, airport workers will need to be fully vaccinated by the 15th of November this year.
Others have until March next year, and if workers decide not to get vaccinated,
they are deciding, I think, that aviation isn't the area for them.
Although there will be exemptions for those with a documented medical reason. The airline introduced the new rule after surveying 12,000 employees.
Nearly 75% of our employees believe that vaccination should be required for all employees.
Yeah, it's a strong starting point, isn't it, when you've got that much support within your own workforce. Let's bring in now Innes Willox, who's with the Australian Industry Group, who's the Chief Executive there. Good to talk to you again, Innes. This is an interesting one. Like, Qantas seems a no-brainer, right? Because of the aviation industry, its important connection of people and places. You can say it's reasonable to have mandatory vaccination there. But just about any factory or warehouse or workplace could argue it's reasonable, because if they get people infected in their workplace, it can effectively shut them down.
Well, Chris, what we're seeing is that businesses are looking very seriously at this, and probably the best barometer we would have now from evidence we've picked up is about a quarter of all businesses are looking at making vaccination mandatory, and about another quarter would like to have public health orders to do it, but recognise that's a long way off, so they're going to try and find their way to do it. Now, this could be any business that's public-facing, like Qantas. You've already had the CEOs of Telstra and today Optus come out and say they're looking at mandatory vaccines for at least part of their workforce. Now, those who go into homes, for instance. You're looking at factories where people are working very closely together in close proximity, call centres perhaps. And then you're looking at jobs where people do go into houses, go into homes for repairs and the like. So there's a lot of circumstances, Chris, where businesses will be looking at this, and they'll feel it's necessary both for their own workplace safety or public safety as a whole, and for their own reputational, to protect their reputation and for reputational issues in case they do have an outbreak or are at the heart of an outbreak.
Look, it's a difficult one. Normally, normally I would be against anything being mandatory, compulsion, and I suppose I remain that way, but then it's within the rights of individual businesses or premises to make these rules, I would have thought. I know there are even doctors who are considering making it mandatory before people come to their surgery that they're double vaccinated. So if you get to that sort of level, the legal tests could be interesting.
Well, look, this will play out legally, no doubt about it. We're hearing about recruiters, for instance, asking the question surreptitiously, people putting it on job applications now. So this is sort of seeping its way into our collective mindset, whether we like it or not. The federal government's made it very clear that they don't want to mandate, apart from aged care, which you mentioned, and New South Wales has done it in construction. That's about it. But they've made it very clear that it is going to be up to individual businesses to make up their minds whether it is, in their minds, lawful and reasonable to mandate vaccination. And businesses, I would say businesses haven't got federal government guidance now or state government guidance. They're really been left to their own devices. So they're going to make their own decisions and then have to try to work it through. Obviously, there'll be consultation with the workforce. But at the end of it all, Chris, the employer is the one who is responsible for health and safety in the workplace.
Absolutely. And normally we expect the utmost diligence from them on that front. So people are going to have to cut them a bit of slack. I just wonder if once we get to 70 or 80% vaccination rates, people will be less exercised about this, because obviously unvaccinated people pose far lesser threat to anybody else. Just before I let you go, Innes, the unemployment numbers out today are going ridiculously low now, way below 5%. But this, of course, masks what's really happening in the economy with lockdowns in Victoria and New South Wales. Do you fear that we could go into another technical recession, 2 quarters of shrinkage in the economy?
Chris, we think that's more likely than not, given the impact combined of New South Wales and Victoria. We think it's highly likely. The unemployment figures today were strong and they demonstrate the resilience of the economy, but also underneath it all was a very clear indication that hours worked has reduced. People aren't working as much. That's the precursor to stand downs and layoffs, and unfortunately, that's probably occurring now across the economy much more than it was a couple of weeks ago, and this becomes cumulative. So you've got all sorts of indications. Federal Treasury say this full total lockdown of the country costs about $3.2 billion a week. We're pretty close to that. We're seeing big closures of shops, strip shops and the like across the country. Perth, I think, is at 1 in 4. Melbourne is at 1 in 5, the CBD. All of those are very clear indications that our economy is slowing quickly. Consumer confidence, business confidence is on the way down. Recession, or certainly a contraction this quarter, more likely than not, almost absolutely certain recession pretty much on the cards, I think.
We all thought 2020 was a tough year. 2021 said, hold my beer. And your footy team and mine are both out of the finals as well. It's been a shocker. Thanks for joining us again, Innes.
There's not much to look forward to, mate.
That's not at all. Innes Willox there from the Australian Industry Group.